Success in our work is imperative, Scully. Reinstatement of the X-Files must be undeniable.
That came from Skinner?
No. We have a friend in the FBI.
Hello, and welcome to Discovering the X-Files, the podcast in which a newbie takes a deep dive into the entirety of Chris Carter's universe, while longtime fans escort me on the journey, a perilous journey filled with government conspiracies or weird monsters every other week. I'm Erix Antoine, and today it's my sincere pleasure to welcome one of my favorite podcasters, the Pensky Files' Clay McCormack. We'll be discussing The Host. Not me, the host of this podcast, but the X-Files episode, The Host, which originally aired in the US on September 23rd, 1994. It was written by Chris Carter and directed by Daniel Sackheim. In this episode, Mulder and Scully investigate a dead Russian found in the sewers of New Jersey. This leads them to the discovery of a fluke-like man, a human tapeworm, a product of the Chernobyl disaster. Mulder does what he can to put the monster's rampage to an end. It's a nice, gross episode, which gives us some great scenes with Walter Skinner, and also features future X-Files writer Darren Morgan, brother of Glenn Morgan, in the role of the creature. After the break, Clay and I are going to get into it. Stick around.
I thought you might be interested in the lab results on the biology of the fluke larva. Dissection and analysis indicates reproductive and physiological cross-trading, resulting in a sort of quasi-vertebrate human.
Human?
Yes, but still capable of spontaneous regeneration like any fluke or flatworm.
How does that happen?
Radiation, abnormal cell fusion, the suppression of natural genetic processes. Mulder, nature didn't make this thing. We did.
Hey, so welcome, Clay. Really glad to have you here. It's a pleasure.
Oh, thanks for having me. I was when you told me you were doing an X-Files show, there's a few that immediately screamed out to me that I wanted to do, and this was very high on the list.
So about that, before we actually get to talking about the episode itself, this is your first time on the podcast, so I'm going to do the typical thing. Just go ahead and give me a brief rundown of your relationship with the X-Files.
Well, it was on TV originally when I was in, I guess elementary school through. This was on for what, 9 years? So probably, yeah, middle school, early high school, I think is when it was going its strongest. And it was one of those shows that I watched all the time. I remember in the early days when it was on, it used to be on back to back on Friday nights with Sightings, which was a great, I don't know if you ever saw Sightings. Sightings it probably does not hold up at all anymore, but it was it was like remember In Search Of with Leonard Nimoy?
Yes, of course.
It was one of those kind of things. It was kind of like Unsolved Mysteries, but more supernatural and extraterrestrial themed.
Okay.
And so the back-to-back with Sightings and the X-Files did a lot for my introduction and education to more esoteric things. And it's always been a favorite of mine. I think I watched everything. Maybe I dropped off the last season of the X-Files on the initial run. I can't remember. And then years later, once it hit streaming, I went back and my girlfriend and I watched our way through it. I remembered that the first season was very hit or miss. And it was one of those things where it's like, well, there's 9 seasons of this show. How about we just watch anything in the first season with a 6.5 or 7 IMDb score or higher? We got through we'd watch maybe half of the first season, then got into the second season where stuff starts to crystallize a little bit more. But it's a classic of genre TV.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's true. Um, yeah, about that thing, sightings. I'm guessing this was a short-lived thing because I've never heard of it. I mean, I'm guessing it was on Fox also, so like it
It
would
was,
air.
yes. Yeah,
Okay.
I honestly don't remember how long it ran for. It was just one of those shows that happened to hit the zeitgeist for me anyway, my
Yeah.
personal zeitgeist, at the right time. And it may have only been a couple seasons, or it may have gone for 5 or 6. I don't remember.
Right. Well, I mean, who knows? Because like there is that show that has become a meme, that thing that Jonathan Frakes hosts, something about
Yes,
truth or fiction, which
fact or
I had
fiction.
not.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, I had no idea what that was until a few years ago when I saw it like on Prime or something. I was like, what the fuck is this? And then
Hmm.
and then it became a meme, a very funny meme, and I think that went on for however many seasons. And I was like, wow, where was I? Like what?
Yeah, these
Yeah.
shows like that tend to kind of really kind of slip under the radar, and they just exist for a long time. I think Fact or Fiction might have been even a syndicated show,
Yeah.
which syndicated shows go on for 12 seasons and you didn't even know they exist.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
I just looked it up. It apparently ran for 5 seasons, sightings.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, mid 90s, I guess, right?
Yep,
Okay.
92 to 97.
Okay. And so I've been living in Bolivia on and off, but I've been living in Bolivia basically since 92.
Hmm.
And most of that period between 92 and 97, I really was here most of the time. And that never aired here. So that would explain why I've just never heard of it. So there you
Sure,
go.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing is too, what sort of fan are you? Are you a mythology guy? Are you a Monster of the Week guy? Are you somewhere in between? Do you hate the mythology episodes? I mean, what's your take on that part of it?
Well, I remember the first watch through when it was on being broadcast. I remembered being more drawn to the mythology stuff,
Hmm.
but on my more recent watch through, I came to the realization that the mythology stuff is usually the worst episodes of the season. For me anyway. I don't think the stuff hangs together very well, and they're always written by Chris Carter, and I find like the Chris Carter ones tend not to be that great. I think he wrote, actually, did he write the host?
He did,
Okay,
and we'll
okay.
talk about that in a minute. Yeah, yeah,
Um,
definitely.
but yeah, I found myself drawn much more to the Monster of the Week stuff. The mythology stuff for me works better, works really well until they start paying it off, oddly enough. For instance, in this episode, you get some of the Mr. X stuff I think works really well. But when they start really trying to explain everything, it's when it's kind of falls apart. Like, have you watched I'm sorry, have you watched the show before, or is this a first watch through for you?
This is basically a first watch. I was gonna say that.
Oh,
Yeah, this
sure.
is basically for me. I mean, I've seen it, sporadically over the years, but I never really watched it, paying
Sure.
attention to it.
Okay.
So
All
this
right.
is really my
That's
first official. So yeah, please, spoilers. Let's
Yeah,
pretend
I
you're
will.
talking
Yes.
to a complete newbie, and pretend that whoever's listening is also a newbie, just in case, so that we're not
Absolutely.
assholes. So like, don't give away anything further on from the episode, but you can totally discuss anything from the first season up until now. That's
Sure.
fine.
Well, I'll try. I'll do my best. I don't remember much of the first season, but yeah, it's the mythology stuff has always been better in lead up than execution for me. And it's even with, especially with the newer reboot they kind of did. I think they really dropped the ball with a lot of that stuff. But when the Monster of the Week stuff hits, when you get a good one, it's some of the best sci-fi TV you're ever going to watch.
No, you know what? I think so. I'm coming to this as a newbie, and so I happen to be aware of it because it's such a big part of pop culture, and so I've always known about that whole war between there's fans who are totally about the mythology, fans who hate it,
Hmm.
fans who are kind of okay with it, and then but there's a lot of people who tend to prefer, and like what I've noticed is most people, like a great number of people, tend to prefer the Monster of the Week episodes,
Mm.
and I've been trying to sort of look at that, trying to figure that out. And you're right. I mean, certainly in the first season, yes, I would say the weakest episodes were mythology episodes, and definitely the best episodes of the season were Monster of the Week episodes.
Mm.
And it's just the thing that the realization though that I'm coming to is that, well, and that's because people are looking at it retrospectively. at the time that X-Files was airing, it wasn't so common for a genre show like this
Sure.
to have like a serialized arc kind of thing to it.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
People just weren't used to it. It was more episodic. It's like, oh, every week. It was the kind of, you could jump in and out of it, catch an episode, maybe miss next week's, come back, and it's all good. The problem with something that's really impenetrable and some kind of a mythology is that the deeper you get into it, if you miss like
Exactly.
2 episodes
Yeah.
and you're lost, you're just like, well, what the, ugh.
Yeah. It's kind of like comic books where you're aware of the X-Men, say, but if you haven't been reading X-Men comics for the past 20 years, when you pick up the newest X-Men crossover series, you're going to have no idea what's going on because they're referencing stuff that happened that you haven't read, and it's unfortunately the nature of the beast with when it comes to serialized TV. And yeah, you're right. At that time, people weren't really ready for that on a large scale. And we talk about this on the Pensky file when we talk about Star Trek and the serialization of Star Trek. This era had shows that were really taking big steps forward as far as that goes, and the X-Files is definitely a prime candidate for that. You've got Twin Peaks doing it pretty explicitly, and then shortly after that is the X-Files, and then later stuff like Buffy the Vampire Slayer. But the X-Files is a really interesting blend of episodic and serialized stuff. And this is definitely a good example of that, this episode, I think.
Yes, exactly. And that's sort of like where I wanted to segue into it because, yeah, this is an episode where it's absolutely a Monster of the Week episode. It is an episode that, by and large, you can pick up and watch, but it's got its little nuggets. It's got its little nuggets that are, it's picking up from the previous episode, which it was picking up some threads from the previous season. And then it's sort of you can tell that it's putting little seeds there that they're going to pick up later. Even though the story of this particular episode is definitely resolved, there's a couple of little, strings left hanging that you go, okay, well, they're definitely going to come back to this. And the first thing that they're not resolving, like the final episode of the first season ends with the X-Files being shut down, which I think is amazing.
Right. I always found that really amazing, even at the time, that at the end of the first season, they just blew up the entire concept of the show.
And it's a sort of thing where you wonder, like back when they did it, was it sort of like, well, we're not sure if we're going to get picked up yet for a second season. Let's kind of give this a little bit of closure just in case, and then like we'll have like a nice little 24 episode cult series that has a kind of a downer ending, but does have an ending. But they were picked up for a second season. So they said, all right, well, fine. Well, now we'll just pick up that thread. We'll figure it out. Right. And they could have easily been like, all right, fuck it. First episode of the second season, guess what? The X-Files are reopened in the first 10 minutes. And then, you sort of be like, oh, come on, man. Like, what was the... Like,
that's usually how it goes, yeah.
Right. And then you just be like, yeah, okay, well, that was a big, like, what was the point of that? But no, they don't actually do that. They sort of, you have Mulder and Scully. They're definitely in a different place in the previous episode, and they're still in a different place in this episode. And by the end of the episode, they're still going to be in a different place. It's not exactly, they're not there yet. They're getting there. And I think that that's good. That they're not resolving the X-Files shutdown right away. They're sort of, that lets the season have a bit of an arc. And I think that it's something to sort of hold on to that can kind of carry you through. And so that speaks to what you're saying, where you have this episode, which is very self-contained. However, there's enough going on in the background that you can be a little invested in. And it doesn't feel as murky and convoluted as the alien mythology episodes have felt up until now. The first season's only got maybe, I think, 5 or 6 like mythology episodes, the first season. And they're always kind of like, okay, so, it's sort of like if you're watching it week to week, you watch one mythology episode, then you have like a chunk, like 3 or 4 or 5, Monster of the Week episodes. And then they go back to the mythology and like, wait, what was that again? Who was that guy? Right. What is this? And it feels weird, but here it doesn't. It kind of feels organic because there are these little details that are just sort of peppered in there. And they don't, like, the episode's not hinging on them. They're just sort of there to intrigue you. And I like that. I mean, you brought up there's a character you referred to as Mr. X, and I'm going to assume that that's the mysterious voice on the other end of the line that's calling Mulder, calls him a couple of times saying cryptic.
Well, I don't want to tell you anything if you haven't watched the show now. But.
Well, all right, yeah, but I mean, Mr. X doesn't mean anything to me. But so let's call him.
Sure,
I did a little research on Wikipedia, but I like, but my point is that it is like he is some guy named, I guess, referred to as Mr. X, because he's like, we don't know who he is. I guess he's like the new Deep Throat, since they killed Deep Throat. So now they need somebody to sort of take his place.
Which at the time, I remember, blew my mind when they killed Deep Throat, because he was such a crucial element to that first season.
Yeah.
And I think the genius of the way that they managed to write this show is what you're talking about, where they managed to completely change the status quo, but also not really change anything.
Mm-hmm.
So they're moving they've completely shattered the setup and the idea of what the show is. But as you're moving forward, nothing has really changed. You still have Mulder and Scully doing their thing, except at different areas. They're still talking to each other about it. They just have this other thing they're dealing with at the same time. And it is, when you're saying it is a Monster of the Week episode, but it does have some mythology undercurrents. It is such a well-written example of that, because I haven't watched an episode of The X-Files since the revival, which was, what, 4 years ago? 3 or 4 years ago at this point?
Yeah, I wouldn't know. I'm going to say you're right. Yeah. Probably.
And before that, I don't think I had. Well, I think we might have like just finished the series in time for that. So let's say I haven't watched an episode of The X-Files in at least 3 years, and I haven't watched an episode from season 2 in probably like 5 years. Going into this, you say it picks up from the last episode. I have no idea what happened in the last episode. I couldn't tell you if you put a gun to my head. However, because of the way they wrote this episode, everything is very clear as far as where everybody stands. There's probably a little bit of help going on my end, because obviously I'm familiar with the characters and stuff. So when I see Skinner, I'm like, okay, this is early on in Skinner's career, so I understand the relationship X, Y, and Z. But they give you all the information. They tell you the X-Files is broken up. Skinner voices his displeasure with Mulder. You get a little bit of that great subversion where Skinner is kind of playing both sides a little bit, but they don't give it to you. It's not like an exposition dump on you.
Exactly.
It's not just someone regurgitating what the setup is and everything. The
yes,
character interactions. Yes, it's very organic through the character interactions and stuff, and it's just really well done.
And it just becomes this intriguing little thing where you can look at it as kind of corny, kind of campy, and in a certain way if you want, but it's not, the whole thing with X calling on the phone and saying cryptic things like, he says something to the effect of, "You must complete this mission, Mulder. It must be completed to satisfaction. The X-Files must be restarted," or whatever. Like, And
I didn't realize Comic Book Man from The Simpsons was the Mr. X in the X-Files.
Well, and it kind of sounds like that. It sounds like a guy doing let me do like a mysterious spy voice.
Right. Yes.
And it just sounds really funny. But you go like, okay, so clearly this is something, and it's enough where you go, okay, so this is what they're going to sort of drag out for a few episodes, and you're prepared for that. And everything you're saying is correct. That it gives you enough exposition in an organic way where you get everything you need to know about the background. But since it's not the main focus, you can even ignore it, and you're still going to enjoy the story. And so what we have here is a good gross episode. It's good. It's it's got a lot to do with toilets. It's the sewers.
I can say for sure it was a bad episode to watch while I was eating breakfast this morning.
Yeah, me too. I did the same thing. And it was, and I'm going like, that's the kind of creepy stuff. The concept of mutant tapeworms, if you will, is, I suppose it's an inherently unsettling thing. It makes you think, because it's, they're taking something that is real, because this exists. The flatworms, tapeworms, this happens. Mulder makes a joke about bad sushi, I believe, at one point.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And so you go like, yeah, and then I flash back to stories that were in the news, I don't know, if maybe about a year ago now, about like an amoeba that was found, I think, in Florida, that's in the water that could eat your brain. And I'm like, these are the thoughts that keep me warm at night. So watching a very unsettling episode about one of those things mutating into like a man worm, it's nice. It's nice and gross and unsettling, and I think that's the thing about the Monster of the Week episode. I guess their best quality, the ones that are really good, is that they can function as a kind of little like horror movie. You know, it's like a nice 45-minute horror flick that works on its own terms. It's unsettling, it's disturbing, it's exciting. And yes, Chris Carter did write it. And you know what? I agree with you. I agree that I'm not a huge fan so far, at least. I'm not a huge fan of his writing.
Yeah.
You know, I can't put my finger on what the problem is, what it is I don't like about it. I mean, I think the guy's got a good head on his shoulders. He created the show. The concept's terrific. The pilot's okay. You know, like it's not amazing. Yeah, it does its job. But then like you come across other episodes that he writes, and there's always something about, there's like a certain inconclusiveness, which I think he wants to play off as ambiguity, and like he wants to give things an ominous note, and he wants things to be kind of ambiguous, but usually it just feels inconclusive. I mean, like I'd like you to tell me, like, what is it that you don't like about Chris Carter's writing?
I think you kind of nailed it, where it's he's a really good idea guy, but I find his scripts generally, from what I remember anyway, to be lacking in execution, and a lot of them tend to be, I'm speaking generally in the mythology episodes and anything else.
Sure.
They especially going forward as they get deeper into it, they tend to be really stretch the boundaries of believability. And I mean, obviously, we're dealing with a show that involves an irradiated muck monster that's grown into human form. But you know, there's a certain level of they do a great job in this episode of maintaining suspension of disbelief as far as that stuff goes, and the show in general does a pretty good job of that across the board. But once they start getting into more of the mythology stuff, the scripts just get, the dialogue isn't great, and the connections that they draw aren't super strong, and it just doesn't. Those are the episodes that generally really need to stick the landing, and from my memory anyway, a lot of them don't.
I can believe that, and I'm going to guess that maybe the majority of mythology episodes turn out to be written by Chris Carter, or at least co-written by him or whatever. But certainly, I mean, to be fair, I mean, he's like one of the showrunners, or the showrunner, or however it is. And so I'm pretty sure he stuck his fingers here and there in everything.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
You know, like any showrunner. However, you do get a sense there's other episodes written by other people, and there's, you know, like so far, Glenn Morgan and James Wong have clearly written so far the strongest ones of the first season, and we'll see what happens here. But
has Darren Morgan written any yet at this point? I can't remember.
He has not. I'm aware of him. He guest stars in this episode. He plays the muck monster. He wears a monster suit, which, you know, I've got to give them props, because one thing that I've enjoyed from the show so far is in their handling of special effects, which, you know, it has its ups and downs, but it's generally okay, and it holds up because they're very minimal about the way they treat it. You know, they tend to have sort of a minimalist approach, and in this case, there's a lot of time passed in the episode where you don't even see the monster. Sure. Which is very effective. You know, it's the whole Jaws thing where, you know, it's what you don't see is better, because then when that big plastic shark comes, it may not work so well. But in this case, it's kind of the same. But once he does show up, they do enough. Like they always keep him in shadow. They always sort of like, they keep it very they show you enough of it where you go like, oh. And then they sort of like leave it at that, and it's okay. Even like towards the end, there's like this shot, a terrible, terrible shot of him like crawling out of the sewer thing, like trying to get away, you know. And it's like, yeah, it's a guy in a suit, you know, and it doesn't look that great, but you know, it's quick enough where you go, all right, you know, it was fine. It was they did it in a way that it was. That it's fine. So like I'll give him props for that. So yeah, that's Darren Morgan, who I am aware. I believe he's Glenn Morgan's brother, right?
Right. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think eventually he's going to start writing for the show as well, maybe even in this season. And so yeah, you have all these other writers who do really good work, and clearly either flesh out ideas that maybe Chris Carter had or whatever else. But because I think that's what it is. You criticize maybe that the dialogue's not great, and yeah, there's like a general flatness to Carter's writing, a general flatness. Not something you can really put your finger on. But what you said is the whole thing about him having really great ideas, but then the way he executes them, the way he presents them, and the way he has the characters expose them is not always very satisfying, and I guess that's maybe the big issue. But yeah, this episode has an interesting story. It grabs like a realistic sort of horrific thing and expands it.
Mm-hmm.
The concept is believable because it's taking something real, expanding on it so that you can be like, all right, I'll buy this. And there are good things in the episode itself, like in the way it's made. It's Vancouver doubling for Newark, which is not an uncommon thing. And since like most of it takes place in like sewers and rooms and whatnot, I guess it's okay.
Wherever it's supposed to be is getting record rainfall, I think, throughout all the first. As long as they shoot in Vancouver, it's like the rainiest season Newark has ever seen or DC has ever seen. It's constantly raining.
Yes. And, like they do little things though that give it some authenticity. I'm going to give them props for, and I don't know any Russian. Okay. So I can't know this, but in the opening scene, it's the entire cold opens in Russian with subtitles.
Mm-hmm.
It's a nice little ominous thing. It's cool. These characters are speaking Russian, and this is just based on the previous episode. The previous episode had a Puerto Rican character. And it struck me as really interesting because as a Hispanic person myself, it's very annoying to watch, American shows that clearly got some guy from Central Casting who can barely speak Spanish, gave him a couple of lines to memorize phonetically, and then he just butchers Spanish, and well, no one's going to know any better, so whatever. But in the previous episode, you had this Puerto Rican who had to be Puerto Rican or Cuban because his Spanish was perfect and it was correct. It was Caribbean Spanish, really well spoken. And so I go like, well, that's great. That shows that they care about that stuff when they don't have to. And so I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, and I'm going to say maybe these Russians are speaking Russian very well. I'm going to assume that. Just like I have to assume I'm a huge fan of the show The Americans, so I'm going to have to assume that all the Russian in that show was great. And until somebody tells me any different, I'll just assume that.
It's interesting. The Russian thing stood out to me as well as I was watching it because I kind of forgot how global the X-Files is in a way that I'm giving it the benefit of giving it too much credit here, but in a way that a lot of other American TV was not at the time, because what you're saying is true. This show takes place in a lot of different locations, and there's a lot of stuff that involves different languages. It's whether it's Russian or Spanish or Native American languages and stuff. They do a really good job of making the world seem big and populated by people who are not just from America, and that these things are not just American. It's not Kolchak the Night Stalker where all of these things keep happening in Newark or something. And a funny story actually. We were when we were watching through a few years ago, I think it was on Netflix at the time, we got to an episode where a good portion of the episode I think was in like Norwegian, or it may have even been a later episode that involved quite a bit of Native American dialogue, and there was no subtitles. And so I'm watching this episode, and it's like 40% of this episode is in Norwegian, and they're not giving you any subtitles. And I was sitting there going, man, this is really, really ballsy for them, for a broadcast TV show in the 90s to do like 15 to 20 minutes in just Norwegian with no subtitles. That's really progressive as far as filmmaking goes. And then we got to another episode, which I knew had subtitles. And that one also did not have subtitles. And I was like, oh, okay. It wasn't a filmmaking decision. It's just Netflix didn't have the subtitles on. So we switched over at that point to either Hulu or Amazon or whatever, and confirmed that, yes, the subtitles just did not exist on the Netflix versions at the time. I remember thinking as we were watching, and I was like, they're putting a lot of faith in their ability as storytellers to be able to tell this story and not have you understand what's going on. And I actually thought for the most part they were successful.
Yeah. I mean, I think that was going to be my next question. I mean, you did watch, I guess, the whole episode without the subtitles, and you were able to follow the story. So that that is testament to good storytelling, good, like
Sure.
where it is visual storytelling. It's just the way things are being told that you know. I mean, technically, you wouldn't even really need the subtitles in the cold open for this episode.
I probably didn't even notice it in this one when they didn't have subtitles because it's pretty straightforward. Yeah.
Yeah, it's basically just, hey, I need you to, turn off that valve or whatever. It's just a bunch of horseshit. It's not, there's nothing important about it. So then I go like, all right, well, they managed to subtitle that. Hey, go open that shaft and look in there.
Right.
Okay, whatever.
It's a really interesting experiment or illustration of showing you what information you do need and what information you don't need. Because, yeah, I think in that situation, I don't know if you're really getting a lot more from actually seeing the translation of what's going on, because the dialogue is pretty much just, boat terminology that is really inconsequential to what's happening. I mean, the energy of the scene is pretty clear.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's that just a guy doing grunt work, and oops, something goes wrong, and that's all you really need, and it gives it to you right there. So yeah, I mean, that's not like this. So that's one thing, going to the authenticity that it's Newark, it's Vancouver doubling for Newark, but then you also have little touches that I like. I mean, the one thing that I love that they do on this show, they always get really great character actors.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes known people, like some semi-known, and sometimes just good actors. Because like I don't know, like the guy who plays the guy that runs the sewage plant.
Yes.
Whoever he is, I don't know who he is. Maybe you know him. I don't know who that actor is, but he's a good actor. He makes an impression. He's memorable. He seems like some guy from New Jersey.
I don't know who he is, but he looks a lot like Joe Kubert, the comic book artist.
Yeah, all right.
That's a deep cut. I'm not expecting anybody to go, yeah, he does.
Well, that's perfectly fine. In a previous episode, there was a character, an arson investigator, in the episode Fire in season 1. And if you want to double check, you can go ahead and do this, and you'll probably agree with me. There is a character in that episode who looked like Denny O'Neil. I was like, is this Denny O'Neil? I actually looked it up to see if it was Denny O'Neil, and it wasn't. But I was like, wow, that guy looks just like Denny O'Neil, and I was blown away.
I think I know who you're talking about, and I've just looked it up, and yes, he does look a lot like Denny O'Neil. Yeah.
Yeah. So there you go. So it's maybe they're just comic fans. I was like, I want this character to look like Denny O'Neil. Find me someone from Central Casting who looks like this, and so on. And so Joe Kubert maybe. So there's that guy who makes a good impression, and then there's the character. There's this like cop who shows up at a couple of sites.
That guy was my favorite guy in the whole episode.
Yeah, he was I was like. I'm like, is this Ralph Macchio? Or
yeah, it's probably a Vancouver actor who they're like read the script and he's like, Newark, huh? Yeah, I can do that. So it's like, yeah, we ain't found bupkis on the street over here. And it's like, okay, guy, dial it back, all right?
He's got the Ralph Macchio inflection. He's 4 feet tall, and I'm like, this guy's a great character. He's a great character. He's kind of, but it was weird that it's like, this guy's like what? He's like the top cop of Newark. Like he shows up like at all the sites.
I gotta be honest, I only get sent to the shit related cases, so this is a big week for me.
Yeah, it was really something. And to that point, so like there is a lot of great character work in the episode in general. This is really good development of the Skinner Mulder relationship.
Yeah.
That Mulder and Skinner are at that place where, I mean, Skinner's basically the angry chief. That's Skinner. That's his function. He's the angry chief. But what I think Mitch Pileggi does a fantastic job with the character, because this could very easily have been just a boring character, just like all the pile of bureaucrat characters we saw in the first season, and I'm sure they'll show up eventually. But there's got to be a reason, because I don't think when they first created the character of Skinner, they got Mitch Pileggi. He shows up about halfway through season 1. And I don't know if at that time they knew that Skinner would be a recurring character. I think they figured, okay, because there've been a bunch of these already who had shown up. And I think what must have happened is they must have seen that Mitch Pileggi is a really good actor, or at least he was doing something genuinely interesting with the character. And I think based on that, they decided to expand the role and actually turn him into a more important character. That's just a theory, but I'm guessing that might have been how it went. Because I do know that he becomes a much more important character going forward.
Oh, definitely, yeah. Yeah, I think his acting, the way he approaches Skinner, you're gonna see this. I don't think I'm ruining anything by saying this, but you get a real sense that he's being pulled in 2 different directions. And it's not even by what he's saying, it's just the way that he says it. There's for whatever reason, the intensity level that he brings to Skinner makes you kind of feel like he's pissed off at Mulder, but he's also pissed off at his own bosses. So he's kind of being pulled in two directions. And you get a little bit of that at the end of the episode where they have that conversation in his office where he says, yeah, this should have been an X-File. So you get a little bit of that where he's like, okay, so he understands that Mulder is important. It's not up to him. It's not up to him to say whether or not the X-Files should exist. Someone else is telling him that they shouldn't. And he's a company man, so he's going to do his job whether or not he thinks it is really the right thing to do. Also, I would like to point out that this is a very rare episode where everybody sees the monster and is totally cool with it. Because there's that scene in Skinner's office where where Mulder passes in his report at the end, and he tries to explain it, and Skinner's like, no, I already saw the thing. It's being sent off to a mental institute. What I'm here to talk about is how you handled this case. And it's kind of like, oh, he understands that there is a half tapeworm, half human creature that exists. And he's just kind of like, yeah, okay, that's today. Now we're going to deal with Mulder's performance review. It's very rare that everybody sees what's going on and is just kind of like, yeah, okay, well, Tuesday.
Yeah, no, that's actually a very good point, because I was going to talk. I mean, you're right about that, but also I was going to talk about that in relation to Scully, who is the eternal skeptic, who basically, again, without spoiling, I'm aware because these things are famous now. They're pop culture tropes and pop culture just watermarks, and yeah, Scully is the eternal skeptic, and I do know that this show goes on for 8 more seasons or whatever it is, and she will never stop being the eternal skeptic. And there does come a point where you go, are you brain damaged? Or am I being unfair?
There is a dynamic reversal at a certain point in a later season.
Okay.
I'm not going to tell you why that happens or whatever, but she kind of has to change her dynamic a bit because of the stuff she's playing off of. However, you're right. Yes, it's generally the joke, I think, for the early seasons is all the stuff happens to Mulder, and then as soon as it's over, Scully comes running in. So she never sees anything. Like, I think I heard somewhere an interview with one of the writers where they were talking about how it was absolutely crucial that Scully never actually see a UFO. Because as soon as she sees one, she's going to start flip her role. So anytime something crazy shows up, she is always never there to see it. Otherwise, her role as the skeptic starts to be less believable. But yeah, you can only take that so far before it's like, okay, come on. This has been happening long enough, and it has happened to you and people around you, et cetera, that I think you need to kind of come around a little bit to maybe things aren't exactly what they seem.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, and they kind of what you're talking about. They're pretty faithful to that conceit for like maybe half the first season or a little more. Yeah. But there come moments where it's like, well, I mean, okay. Because she experiences a lot of wild shit in the first season regardless. I mean, Toombs comes after her early on, and then you have, and okay, fine, whatever, maybe she can dismiss that. But then eventually you have her actually, because she doesn't see a UFO, but she does break into a lab, and she holds an alien fetus in her hand.
Oh, that happens in the first season? I didn't think that happened till later. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's season finale. That's Erlenmeyer Flask. And she's holding an alien fetus in her hands, and you're going like, all right, at that point you kind of go, look, okay, maybe aliens exist. Okay, fine. I'll believe that aliens exist. I'll still doubt you about poltergeists and werewolves and whatever else, but okay, fine. Maybe aliens do exist. Maybe they do. We'll see. This certainly looks like suspicious. And now in this episode, she, with her own eyes, sees the human tapeworm thing.
Yeah.
She sees it. And again, it's the sort of thing where like, okay, well now you're aware that this is a possibility. And then of course, conveniently, this is explained away. She's able to like find some paper, some scientific research thing, I think. I'm not sure what that was, where she intimates that this is because of Chernobyl. So she goes like, yes, well, evidently. I mean, a irradiated mutation because of Chernobyl. Of course, I can believe that Chernobyl happened. Sure,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So
They kind of the stuff that they do have her see is, at least early anyway, feels like stuff where if she could rationalize it, even if
right.
the answer is outside beyond the pale of what you assume reality to be, it's based in science enough that she could explain it away if she needed to. Like the Chernobyl thing. It's
Yeah.
yeah, okay, it's technically the same explanation as the Godzilla, and obviously Godzilla doesn't exist. I mean, he might exist in the X-Files universe. I don't know. That would have been a good episode. It's the same kind of idea that, okay, mutation, radiation. So it's something. It's more tactile science that she can grasp onto. And same even with the alien fetus, where it's like, okay, well, this is genetics. This is something a little bit more concrete than poltergeists or sexy vampires or pyrokinetic people or whatever. A little bit
Yeah.
easier to grasp for her
Yeah,
anyway.
yeah, and I do like the dynamic. They're keeping the dynamic going. They're still keeping them apart. Mulder and Scully at this point are still apart,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's an interesting detail where I guess they're keeping that hanging so that fans will really want them to eventually start working together again. They
Right,
really want to
right.
keep that sort of like yeah, so that when they finally do work together on a case straight on, or when X Files get reopened, as I imagine they eventually will, or whatever, it can be a really satisfying moment for a fan who's been following this, and that speaks again to where they were wise to not just resolve that cliffhanger, to
Yeah.
just be like, it's not going to be that easy. They're not going to just reopen the X Files.
It's
Yeah,
interesting to me that a show in the 90s has more patience for that stuff than shows do now, where shows now are all almost exclusively serialized,
yes,
sometimes to a fault. And I feel like even though they're all serialized, none of them, well, some of them do, but a lot of them don't have the patience to do a story like this, where you have busted open the concept of your show and you're just going to let it hang until it dramatically feels like it's the time to bring it back. Like, for instance, Wes and I on Pensky File have been covering Star Trek Discovery, and they open their season by showing that the ship and Michael Burnham, the main character, have been split up. And there's so much room there for these two things to be separate and kind of tell their own story, so that when they do get back together, it feels like it's an earned story beat, but they just bring them back in like the second episode and it's fine. It's surprising that shows that are these shows now that are this long form style of storytelling, a lot of them tend to not have the patience to do long form storytelling.
yes, it's like they're playing this sort of tug of war because I mean, it has its ups and it has its pros and its cons because
Mm-hmm.
you look at X Files, which okay, long form storytelling, but you're talking about a 25 episode season,
Mm-hmm.
which means get ready for lots of filler, my friend.
Sure. Yes.
But in this particular case, you're like, well, shorter episode order. We've only got to worry about telling a story across 12 episodes as opposed to 25, and so that it allows us to tell something a little bit tighter. But let's go ahead and still tell a story. So what you're saying is true because I'm also watching Discovery,
Mm-hmm.
and it takes away the feeling of satisfaction. The emotional payoff is gone. So yes, I completely agree with you. And I think it's just a tug of war between wanting to tell a satisfying, a like interesting long form story, but also wanting to just check off boxes and do fan service and do all this stuff
Right.
like.
Right.
And it's that tug of war between telling a good story and just fulfilling expectations
Right.
and
Yeah.
not knowing how to really balance that.
I think the king of long-term storytelling at this point has to be David Lynch. I don't know if you're a Twin Peaks fan,
Huge
but
fan.
did you
Huge
watch
fan.
Twin Peaks: The Return?
I absolutely did.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he spent 18 very long episodes just dangling Agent Cooper in front of your face and doesn't give you Agent Cooper until like the last 45 minutes of the entire series.
Yeah, I know.
But when you get there, it's like, yes, finally he's back. It's you feel it. I mean, you could argue that maybe he waited too long in that case, but that's
Yes,
your mileage may vary. Not having the patience to tell stories like that is interesting in this era of everything is prestige television, long form story formats, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, yeah, definitely, and I'm right there with you. I mean, though, I am the FBI, and I'm going, yes.
Yeah.
And I think that David Lynch, I don't know. I think he gets a kick out of torturing the audience.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Especially in that show. Yes.
Yeah. There's no. I mean, we've had conversations in the past, and you brought up a Family Guy joke, and I've always liked there is a I think it's Family Guy. It's they do a joke on David Lynch, where he's like Santa Claus or something, and then there's like a kid who's like, why didn't you leave a saucer of coffee for me? Like, he goes like, in the future, always leave a saucer of coffee for me, and also in the past.
Well, it's the Simpsons joke where they cut to the guy dancing. Homer's watching Twin Peaks, and it's the guy dancing with a horse or something, and they just cut back to Homer, and he goes, "This is amazing. I have no idea what's happening."
Cool. Well, I mean, back to X-Files, which was influenced by Twin Peaks to some degree. Yeah. What is our final word on this episode in terms of the quality of it? What do we think? I don't do ratings here or anything like that.
Sure,
It's just general talk.
No, I think it's great. I think it's especially from the early seasons of the X-Files, this is as close to a classic as you're going to get, because as far as the monster goes, I think if you polled 100 people who were familiar with the X-Files, moderately, I'm not talking like super fans, and I'm not talking people who've only seen one episode, but like people who have watched a few seasons, maybe not hardcore fans, and you said, who are your top 3 most memorable monsters? This guy's going to show up on that list because he was all over. I remember at the time he was all over the ad campaigns and stuff, and it's just a very identifiable, relatable monster where it's this thing that lives in the sewer, that lives in like your toilet. The shot of the slow camera move over the top of the porta potty, looking down into the porta potty, and then you just see the face come out of the shadow, is a fantastic shot and has made me wary of porta potties ever since.
Yes. Well, yes. I mean, and that's what I was saying at the beginning. The reason it works so well is because Chris Carter took a very identifiable, relatable fear, and extrapolated it. Because I believe he was inspired by an incident in which his dog had worms.
Oh, sure.
And so, people also get worms. And
I have heard like firsthand accounts of people having worms that are absolutely terrifying. And so it's a very visceral, relatable. Like when the dude's in the shower and he pukes up the worm. Oh my God.
Yeah. I mean, and you're talking to somebody who's I'm gonna own up to it. I'm basically a hypochondriac. So
sure. I'm pretty much there too.
Yeah, so like I see things like this and I go, well, shit, that's I go that this is why
something new I got to worry about is shit like, monsters.
Yeah, this is why. Or the shit weasels from Dreamcatcher. No, you go like I go like. Well, this is why you got to drink filtered water. This is why, it just becomes pretty insane. And so, like, the episode definitely works because it is able to tap into that. And obviously, a lot of horror movies do this, but of course, the most vulnerable, or certainly one of the most vulnerable places that a human being can be in is a bathroom.
Oh, sure.
Whether you are, whether you're dumping off your daily load or taking a shower, it's like at that moment you are most vulnerable.
For years, anytime I took a shower, I would double check the back of the shower head after seeing Arachnophobia.
Yes.
And I can't remember exactly what it is, but there's something in there where it's a spider that's either in the shower head or it's like just tucked up behind it that ends up coming out when the shower starts. Every time I took a shower, I'd make sure that whole area was clean before I turn anything on.
Yeah, no, definitely, and that's why the episode that's why the episode really works, and I agree with you. I think it's great. I mean, I think the first season was fine. It was
Hmm.
solid. It had, it had its ups and downs, but it was basically solid. But so far, this second season has gotten off to a very, very good start with back-to-back, just really good episodes, really interesting episodes. One last detail that I'll bring up, just
Hmm.
because it's a behind-the-scenes thing, and I noticed it now. Like I didn't really notice it the first episode, but I noticed it here.
Hmm.
And apparently, Gillian Anderson was pregnant at the time that this
Yeah,
episode was
it's pretty
produced.
clear.
Yes. And so that means that they shoot all of her scenes as if they were music videos for Heart.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I think that that's just, I nothing against, I understand, fine. I just think it's always a tricky thing
You're
where
gonna take a hard stance on pregnancy.
no, I'm not going to take any. It's perfectly fine. No, what I want to talk about has nothing to do with that. I just
Yeah,
mean the way that shows have to sometimes deal with this because it happens. It's a
sure,
human
sure.
thing.
Yeah.
So the actress gets pregnant, and when a show decides that let's not, they don't have space in their narrative to work that into the narrative. So they have to figure out what to do, because
Hmm.
obviously it was like, well, it's not going to make sense. We can't do it here. I mean, Scully, we can't just have Scully get pregnant. I mean, we can't, it's not going to work for the show. What do we do? So it's like, well, let's just shoot it as if we were shooting a Heart music video.
It's like 55 degrees out, but she's wearing 14 coats and stuff.
Yeah, right. And
It's
a lot of close-ups, like it's just a lot of like her
hmm
face, her
hmm
face, her face, and then you go like, all right, fine, I get it. This is how they had to deal with it because they had no other recourse at this point. And then I'll be curious to see how they handle it going forward. I'm sure that there comes a moment where, like, I will not be surprised if there's a bunch of episodes where Scully just is not there. So
I
it's almost like an automatic spoiler, almost. But yeah, go ahead. You were going to
without
say.
ruining anything, I will tell you that they do address it. Let's put it that way.
Okay, good, well enough. And and I'll give them credit, at least when handling this, they are discreet, they are
Hmm.
tasteful.
Hmm.
It makes me think that back on Frasier, on the sitcom Frasier, when Jane Leeves got pregnant, they had this whole storyline of like Daphne getting fat. And
Oh,
so
really? Oh, I didn't
yeah,
know
so
that.
yeah, basically it did that. So it's like it's like almost a season's worth of episodes that are just filled with fat jokes at Daphne's
Wow.
expense.
That's really
And I go
funny. Yeah.
like, yeah, it was like, well, like the first time you did it was kind of funny, but now it's like, come on, Frasier, you're better
Sure.
than this. Like this is a better show than this. I mean, come on, guys. Like, why didn't you just have the character get pregnant? But anyway, so like that is the that was just a fun detail. But yeah, overall, great episode, and I really enjoyed it, and I'm pumped to see how the season continues to develop from this
Yeah.
point on. Yeah.
I did want to ask you a question. I don't know if this is something you've talked about at all, but I'd be curious as someone who's going through the X-Files for the first time.
Sure.
Where do you think that there is a place in the world for the X-Files in 2020? Because the stuff that they're dealing with is very much born of the era that it was created. And I found myself thinking about that as I was watching, where I was like, well, if he had a camera phone, a lot of this stuff would kind of be a moot point because he'd be able to take pictures of stuff. And this is a different episode because everybody sees the monster. But I was thinking like, well, take a picture of the monster. It's kind of hard to refute that. And just the general climate of the level of conspiracy and distrust at the time being a little bit more, what's the word? Harmless, I guess, is a good way to put it. Although,
Yes.
aside from Timothy McVeigh and stuff like that, generally the idea of conspiracies and stuff was more harmless, and even the show is a lot more supernatural focused, even though they do get into a lot of government stuff. Do you think there is a place for a show like the X-Files as it existed now, or would you even say that it makes even more sense now in 2020 and beyond?
That's a very interesting question, and the reason that it's very interesting is because I actually did kind of think about that while watching this episode. Not specifically that, like exactly as you phrased it, but I did have a thought about let's call it the socio-political climate of the X-Files at that time as opposed to where we are today. And the reason I had that thought is because like when they're in Skinner's office, there's this one shot where Skinner's standing there, and on the wall you can very clearly see a portrait of Bill Clinton.
Mm-hmm.
And so I go, yeah, of course, this is '94. This is Clinton's president. This is September of '94. So yeah, I mean, the OJ trial is still going on, but this is a different time. It just really made me think about that, how it's a different time where you can have a show that has that whole government conspiracy angle, like shady government stuff, but it's all based around very pulpy concepts. It's based around alien viruses and just stuff that is very comic book, very like pulp stuff. Nothing that will hit close to home. And I said, because even though there were, this was at a time, I think, when people were basically okay.
Sure, yeah.
I mean, the government, like, money was good. All we had to worry about in 1994 was
Cold War was over.
Yeah, Cold War was over. So what was tabloid TV? It's right. O.J. Simpson murdered his wife. Oh, Tanya Harding, and all that stuff. Like, that's the stuff that was on people's minds.
Yeah.
So this really felt like escapism, because it was like, wouldn't it be nice if we actually lived in this exciting world of government conspiracies and aliens and these monsters and sewers? Okay, and that was 26 years ago, and now we are in a world that is pretty apocalyptic.
At least in the way people are viewing it, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's like now it's not, we're not, now we are concerned, with things where this stuff just feels more like nonsense.
Yeah.
Where it's like, we've got real problems, man. Like I wish that the only thing I had to worry about was that the government is stashing alien viruses or alien fetuses in some lab somewhere and like injecting a population of kids. I wish that was like that was it. Then I could actually create some pulpy nonsense out of it instead of like real problems. So I don't know. I mean, I think there's a space for it in terms of escapism. And let's hope things start to get better over the next few years. We'll see. But it was a little bit weird, and that's why I'm going to be very curious, because my intention is to watch the whole thing.
Sure.
And then eventually watch the revival, which of course I didn't see a second of. And so I'm going to be very curious, because the revival is from a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it predates, the Trump era, but not by much.
It definitely overlaps. I can't remember if the first season does, but the second season definitely does, I think.
Right. Okay. So, I mean, but I will be interested to see how X-Files fits within that, because within that context, what they do. And so I think that might answer your question, in fact.
Yeah.
But I take it you did watch the revival.
I did, yeah. There was one of the things that actually made me first start thinking about this question is there's a character in the revival who is essentially an Alex Jones analog, and he's ultimately proven to be right about stuff. And seeing that, I was like, oh, I don't like that. I don't, and it made me think about where a show like this stands in this. You mentioned tabloids, and I think this show is very much born of tabloid newspaper culture. There's a tabloid in this episode that they use as a clue to figure out what's going on. And the show has always felt more like the fun of tabloids, where it's Mulder and Scully investigating Bat Boy or something, than what things are now, where you've got people taking legitimate violent action based off of what amounts really to a tabloid story.
Exactly.
And on our Discord, I've mentioned it a few times, where I was thinking, well, what does Fox Mulder in 2020 look like? Is he a QAnon guy, or is he buying into this stuff, or is he the is Fox Mulder the one who is aware of it, but recognizes that it is dangerous and it is not the truth? You know, how does Fox Mulder react to stuff like that? And I think it is a very different global environment for a show and a character like that.
Yes, and I think, I mean, again, I can't speak to it because I haven't seen it, but I am aware that the revival was not entirely embraced.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it might be in part because of that. I think it might be because in today's climate, the fun idea, you know, like what you said here, you have Scully reading through the tabloids, and you know, it brings to mind like Men in Black. You know, in the movie Men in Black, where like Tommy Lee Jones is like, you can check the Times, they get it right sometimes, but you know, the National Enquirer is where it's at, or whatever. So you know, you go like, okay, and we laugh at that because of course we know that stuff's ridiculous, but in the sense of escapism, it's fun, and the same with the X-Files. But nowadays you have like your Alex Jones people who basically spew nonsense that's not too far removed from that. I mean, they're not going to go as far as to say, you know, an alien baby or whatever, but they do still spout. I mean, maybe they do. I don't follow
a couple
it.
Years.
But, yeah, right. But you know, they do spew nonsense, and then there are people who, as you said, act on that nonsense. They don't laugh it off, and so like, yes, who would Mulder be today? You know, and so that's a very interesting question, and I don't think I can completely answer it until I've processed it a bit more. But what I can say is that it does make me very curious to see where things go. And that I think that one of the reasons why that works is it really shows just what a different time it was 26, 27 years ago, where our climate was so different. You know, I mean, the dawn of the internet, certainly there was nothing approximating what the social media landscape is today. And so obviously the misinformation campaigns that exist today, it just was not as aggressive. It was not as widespread, and it was not as toxic. So yeah, that is a very interesting question. But it doesn't discourage me from wanting to keep on watching the show and enjoying it.
Definitely. Yeah. It's really interesting to go back and watch a show like this now, because we on our horror podcast, the Rotten Horror Picture Show, we just covered Rec, the Spanish zombie movie from, I don't know, about 10 years ago, like more than 10 years. I forget what it's called.
It's something like that though. Yeah.
Yeah. And Amanda, my co-host, and I both had similar responses to it, where it wasn't really quite working for us. And that's a movie that is fairly universally praised as being a great zombie movie. And one of my theories of it was the story. I don't know how much more viability there is for something like the zombie type outbreak genre, because I'm watching Rec, watching a bunch of idiots act like idiots in the face of an outbreak. And
yes,
we're currently living through that. And so I'm watching Rec go, like, siding with the shadowy hazmat guys that are trying to shut down the building and contain everything. I'm like, yeah, just listen to these guys, stay calm, it'll be fine. This thing will be over. It won't be a problem. Instead of, you know, people acting like crazy people inside and blowing everything up and causing it all to spread, which I guess is more, I guess it's kind of realistic in that sense. But
yeah,
I was just like so desperate watching it for them to figure out how to deal with the situation instead of letting it get out of control. I think because it's something that we're kind of currently living through. And so with the X-Files, it's the same thing, where it's like, well, it'll be interesting to see how much of this stuff feels kind of quaint or doesn't really land anymore, because we've gone from the 90s where the Weekly World News was a tabloid, and now it's in the press pool of the White House, essentially. It's tough. I'll be curious to see what your view on it is as you get through the show.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I'm going to be curious to see that myself. I want to see how that evolves and how I react to it. Absolutely. So yeah, I mean, this has been a fantastic talk, man. Just like really rich and full of stuff to
yeah,
ponder.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It was a real pleasure. And so now I want to throw it to you. I would like you to please plug whatever you'd like to plug so that our listeners can find you elsewhere, because I really think they should.
Sure. I have a couple shows I do with, I have a Star Trek show that I do with my co-host Wes called The Pensky File. We're currently working our way through Season 2 of Star Trek Enterprise and Season 3 of Star Trek Discovery. I have another horror movie show that I do called The Rotten Horror Picture Show with my co-host Amanda, where we cover films off of the Rotten Tomatoes 200 Best Horror Movies of All Time list. And I have another one that I do. Geez, is this all I do? I mean, I'm always looking for a void to yell into. So a show called the Bat Ass Podcast, the Batman the Animated Series Show podcast, where myself and DC Comics artist Sean Murphy talk about Batman the Animated Series. And if you want to, I'm on Twitter at DeadMeatComic and on Instagram at CMcCormack414 if you want to check out any of that stuff.
I will be providing, of course, links and all that. So yeah, I mean, again, thanks a lot for being here, man. It really was great.
Everything looks in order.
Well, that's just an unexpected response, considering the bizarre nature of the case and of the suspect.
The strangeness of the criminal and the crime are not lost on me. I had my reaction to them this morning in my conversation with the federal prosecutor's office about how to process the suspect.
There's no way you'll prosecute this.
The Justice Department has asked the suspect be transferred to an institution for a full psychiatric evaluation.
This is not a man. It's a monster. You can't put it in an institution.
Well, what do you do with it, Agent Mulder? Put it in a zoo?
You know, you had a pair of agents that could have handled a case like this. But you shut us down.
I know. This should have been an X-file. We all take our orders from someone, Agent Mulder.
And that is that. I hope you enjoyed our discussion. And if you did enjoy it, there are many ways you can support the podcast, which is available on Anchor FM, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other platforms. You can subscribe, you can rate and or review it depending on what platform you're enjoying it on, and of course you can share and spread the word on social media. Please do any or all of these things. Every little bit helps. Look for the Erix Antoine Network on Facebook or on YouTube. You can also follow me on Twitter at ErixAntoineNet and check out my film reviews on Letterboxd. You should also absolutely check out The Pensky File at thepenskyfile.com, where Clay, along with another fine podcaster named Wes Teasdale, have a cornucopia of podcasts. There are hours and hours of Star Trek discussions, if that's your bag, but also podcasts on movies, music. There's loads of content to dig into, and all of it is good. Look at the episode description for a link to that, and also so you can stalk Clay on Twitter and Instagram if you are so inclined. I'm Erix Antoine. I'll be back in a few days when Daniel and I will be discussing Blood. Not actual blood, the X-Files episode called Blood. So if you want blood, you've got it if you join us, and I hope you do. So until then, please remember that the truth is out there. See you next time.